All right, peeps, on today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius, the genius will be once again talking to Hong Kong movie legend Bey Logan. Lots of gems, lots of Kung Fu in Hong Kong, and lots of Hollywood. Stop remaking good movies and start remaking bad ones so you can make them better. Let's get to it!
And every day, I practice martial arts. Watch out!
All right, everyone. Well, here we are with another episode of the Kung Fu Genius, and I'm here once again with the mighty Bey Logan.
That's right.
So thank you again.
A Kung Fu Genius and a Kung Fu in the same shot. How often does that happen, boys and girls?
So I figured since we've had our conversation about the Yip Man films, the Wing Chun movies, Bruce Lee, we would talk about something a little closer to home here in Hong Kong, which is the state of Chinese martial arts here in Hong Kong at this time. Now, you have one of, I think, the last places where really Kung Fu can truly be appreciated in all of its forms. The art through the various instructors who teach here, the films, the literature.
Yeah.
So why don't we first start talking about the Martial Club?
Yep.
Why it's awesome,
yes.
And maybe why, you know, what maybe the mission behind it is.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because it kind of, like many things, it evolved. I mean, the Martial Club from being really just a martial arts school with add-ons to being, I think, the last remaining, or perhaps the only ever, Hong Kong-based center for martial culture, Southern Chinese, or not even Southern, Chinese martial culture. And it's something that the government should be doing, that Chinese people should be doing, but it ended up being this guy. And the history of it was that the Golden Harvest Studios was closing down, and they were going to be dumping all of their movie memorabilia from the Bruce Lee films, from the Jackie Chan films. You can see it all behind us. And I couldn't bear to see that happen. And I was actually dealing as a filmmaker with Golden Harvest at the time. And they told me of this, and they said, can you think of anybody who might want to take on all this memorabilia? And I was like, I couldn't sleep that night, and I called them the next day. I said, if I couldn't think of anybody, what are you going to do? And they said, we haven't really decided, which I think meant we were going to throw it away. They were going to throw it away. So then I spoke to my father-in-law, and I said, look, I need to get a warehouse. And we got one in Cheung Sa Wan. And then we moved all the stuff like overnight because they were closing the warehouse at Golden Harvest Studios. And then once we actually moved everything in, there was a space to the left and a space to the right. It was like one of those tubs of ice cream. The middle was filled. And I'm like, okay, we'll have my film company on the left. And I said to Mak Sifu, my teacher, Mak Jigong Sifu, why don't we open a martial arts school here? And he goes, it's so low-to, so old-fashioned to open a martial arts school, and it's so hard to make money at it, and that's a bad idea. I said, all right, fine, you can keep teaching at the park and at the docks. Next thing I know, he comes in, he says to me, I've been consulting the Chinese almanac. And I said, well, what does it say? He says, the best day is Tuesday. For what? Opening a Kung Fu school. Where? Where you said. So it became his idea. And we opened the school. And then we were there. And it was like, you visited it, right?
Yes.
And you probably saw the best of it because you had a flying visit. But it was upstairs from a restaurant. We had hot and cold running rats. We had the stink of food. It was too hot in the summer. It was too cold in the winter. But it was ours, and we loved it. And then one day, the landlord, sadly, whose name... you can't write this. It was Lum Zhou, the same name as one of our great grandmasters of Hong Ga. And the guys upstairs were pork butchers, which also added to the smell. And one of them had done Hong Ga before. And so I always remember this because we'd complained about the smell. And I was in my office, and my son Ryan comes and says, Dad, the guys from upstairs have come down. The pork butchers, they want to talk to you. And I just had a vision in my mind of like these guys in bloodstained smocks holding the juyuk do, waiting to carve me up. And I said, do they look pissed? He goes, no, they're looking at all the pictures. So I come out, and they're all looking at Lam Sai Wing and Lam Zhou and everybody and going, wait a minute, you Hong Kun Pai. And then turns out one of them was a Hong Ga guy and a pork butcher. Go figure.
Sure.
So then our poor landlord died, and his not-so-nice widow was like, you Kung Fu people. No nice noise, make money, you got to go. So that was that. So then I was on the road looking for a new school. And oh my God, I should have filmed that as a documentary, Quest for Martial Club. Because they showed me, there was one room, it was like, in The Matrix when they go into a white area with no boundaries and
there's
nothing
in there.
Right, they showed me one place like that. And I'm like, what am I going to do here? Oh, you're going to build a wall. And well, I'm not going to build a wall. I want a place that's kind of, I said to them, I want a place that used to be a shipping company. So you have an office area where they used to do all the accounts. and an open area where they used to keep all of the textiles and boxes for shipping. That's what I want. And they showed me, in one place I liked the look of it, and I went in, and the guy sitting in there goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "Oh, well, I might want to rent this place." He said, "Well, I started renting it last week." And I turned to the woman, she goes, "Oh, I'm out of date with my info." And then I thought, okay, maybe this isn't going to work. We can never have another martial club. So I went back to the Cheung Wan school, and I sat there, and I was having a coffee and feeling a bit depressed. And my teacher, Max Sifa, comes over, and he puts his arm on my shoulder, and he says, "Bey," in Chinese, he goes, "Bey, don't give yourself so much pressure. Mo Bey le chige kam dong alik ma. Le wanam do sang mo gun. Sifu fan ma tao gao yan ma. Don't give yourself so much pressure. If you really can't find another martial arts school, Sifu will just go back to the pier to teach. Forget about me." Then I thought to myself, God damn it, now I really have to find a place. Like, if he had been pestering me and forcing me and and said, "You have to find a place," then I'd be like, "Damn you, do you know how hard it is?" But he was like, "Hey, he was so nice about it. I definitely had to find a place. So the next day, with renewed vigor, I went into another agent's, like a property agent's. And this young fella turns around and he says in Chinese, "Hey, I recognize you. You're that foreigner, that Guaylo who's always on TV talking about Bruce Lee." I thought, that is I. And I knew, I'm a believer in Yun Fan, in fate. I knew he would show me the right place. He goes, "Oh, I know what you're looking for." And I explained, shipping place, office space next door, space where you store stuff, and yada, yada, yada. I know it's in Kwai Fong. So he brought us over here. And at that time, the owner, who is now my landlord, made all his money with toys. And he made his fortune with those little yellow plastic ducks. Now, you may ask yourself, how can you make a fortune from little yellow plastic ducks? Okay, each one costs not much, but everybody has one. Do you have one? Have you ever had a yellow duck?
I've had a yellow duck.
Exactly. You probably bought it from him. So the place was completely a sea of yellow ducks. Remember Uncle Scrooge?
Yes.
Swimming through the kind of the doubloons or the bullion down in the basement.
Diving into it, yep.
That was what it was like. You could dive into a tub of little yellow ducks. So then I turned to Sifu, and in Cantonese, "can you or can you not" means duck is duck. So among all the ducks, I said to him, "Duck," and he goes, "Duck." So then we cleared out all the ducks and redecorated it, and it became the lovely Martial Club today. And then originally it had the same, I would say, the limitations that we had before. It was an office for my filmmaking and book publishing. It was a martial arts school for Max Sifu and him alone to teach. And it was the storehouse for the movie memorabilia that we were selling through www.reeleast.com. That's reeleast.com for all of your martial art movie memorabilia needs. So that's stored here. Then slowly we started, not through any master plan. This actually is the story of my life. It's kind of like Joseph Campbell talked about the path finding you. It's a master plan that somehow made manifest. And people say, "Oh man, you really must have worked hard on that." I'm like, nope. Somehow it was like, if you build it, they will come. We had a martial club, and then we had different Sifus. Dang Sifu from Siulam Phakka, Yeung Sifu from Tong Bei Chuan, Michael Chan Sifu teaching Wing Chun and also teaching Krav Maga. And then we just went on from there. And then we have Wan Sifu now, and then we have Vika and Kati coming in. So it's like we just had, at any given time, 5 different teachers at different nights of the week teaching. And also cultural events, and became like the preeminent cultural center for the propagation of Chinese martial culture in the modern times. And if anyone from the government seeing this and feels like sponsoring us, it's a bit like one of, I've got to not do the funny voices because I know it doesn't go over well with your woke audience, but one of the Indian students of Michael said to me, "Are you like a non-profit?" I said, "Well, not intentionally, but it works out that way." And so that's where we are today. And our mission statement is that we want to preserve and promote Chinese martial culture in all its many forms. And that includes book publishing. It includes the movies that I make. It includes documentaries that we make. It includes the tuition. And of course, the space is available, as you've availed yourself of it, to teach private lessons. And anybody coming to Hong Kong looking for a space that's fully equipped, 3 dummies, 2 wooden ones over there, and me in the chair, and all the Thai boxing equipment, everything you might need, you're very welcome to come and use Martial Club.
Yeah.
Excellent.
It's also one of the highlights of our tour every year when we come for the ultimate Hong Kong Kung Fu tour. I bring them here on the second day to do a lesson with Maxifu to see all the memorabilia. And we have two completely different groups on both years. And they all said they just love the feeling of the place, the vibe.
Yeah.
They love coming back. And it's definitely one of the highlights of the tour.
I don't know that I had that. I think you're like me in a sense that if we could go back in time and talk to the 20-year-old Alex, 20-year-old Bey, and say, even though there's many years apart in that, but anyway, and you said, where would you like to be at 50, at 60, or what have you? I would say for me, it's pretty close to the life I have now. The area of it that we couldn't have conceived at 20 is the wonderful, profound joy of being a father. That's something you don't think about when you're a kid. You say, I want to do Kung Fu, and I want to hang out with Jackie Chan and Sammo Hung, and I want to, all those things.
Right.
Which we did, which I did. And so I definitely feel that this has fulfilled all of those dreams. Some became nightmares, but at the time it was like a dream to have this kind of place open all the time for my own training, my own studies and practice, and it worked out.
Right.
Excellent. So talking of non-profit and promoting martial culture, the best way to support the Kung Fu Genius
is on Patreon, patreon.com/The Kung Fu Genius. For as little as $5 a month, you can get access to episodes early, and higher tiers of support get all sorts of goodies, especially private. We got private videos, the historical videos, and maybe we'll have special outtakes from this one just for our Patreon supporters. And if you don't want to support us on Patreon, you can support us right here on YouTube with memberships. And yeah, thanks for supporting the KFG podcast. So
I think that's hot. Check out his OnlyFans account.
Yes, the OnlyFans.
Anyway,
yeah, where every title of every episode includes a long pole in it.
So, beat me to the punch. I was going to say, lends a whole new meaning to the 6.5 point pole.
The jokes never end with our weapons. So you have this great place here in Kwai Fong where you have all these different martial arts instructors coming and teaching, all the great cultural stuff, but this is kind of a very unique thing in Hong Kong, not just obviously for how great it is, but just in general, having a place where Chinese martial arts is appreciated is getting harder and harder to find here in Hong Kong. What, for people who've never been to Hong Kong or maybe have an idea of Hong Kong, which is mostly from movies from the 70s, what can you let our audience know about what is the current vibe, current attitudes toward Chinese martial arts in terms of like Hong Kong people, Hong Kong government, the support or lack thereof? Can you discuss that a little bit?
Well, I mean, I think that Hong Kong now, in the older days, as Sifu described, when you were a working guy in the 60s and the 70s, and you finished work at night, you either sat at home in a very cramped apartment, normally without air conditioning, and you, if you wanted to go out, there were limited things that you could afford to do as a regular working Joe. You could go to the movies, which is cheap, which is one reason the film industry boomed like it did. You could go bowling, or you could go and learn Kung Fu. So you had a whole class of guys, many of whom later became actors, like Chen Guantai, who had been a fireman, or Lau Kar-leung, who had been an accounts clerk, made the transition from being regular working stiffs to being Kung Fu movie stars. So that was the kind of the community feeling then of young people came and trained. The old people didn't, and little kids didn't. It was all these young, buff guys. There was also, I think it's been commonly acknowledged, a connection between the triad world, the Haksai Wui, and the martial art, the Kung Fu world, which is why a lot of middle-class parents didn't want their children or their relatives to do Kung Fu. That's why it was mostly working-class folks, like indeed Maxifu, who's very well-educated and very well-spoken, but really is from a working-class background. So that's what happened. Now, over time, I think that those younger people have so many more activities to do, or they can just sit at home and look at their phones all night, or play games like my boys do. So they're not going to go out and train Kung Fu. So now we end up getting little kids who are kind of dumped on us by their parents, and older folk who always wanted to learn Kung Fu but never had the chance to. And in the middle range, you have, and I'm interested because I feel it's the same with you, which is that my son Ryan was asking me the other day, how do you think Alex do you think he can expand and have more students? And I think in both the Martial Club and also with City Wing Chun, your school, pretty much everybody who you could find who is somebody who wants to do Kung Fu is there. It's not like you've left stones unturned. It's like that they can't find you, that you're not promoting yourselves enough. To me, now we have the people who are left, when you say, okay, the working class are doing other things. The people who are left in society who want to train, we have them. And they're either doing Wing Chun, or they're doing Hong Gar, or they're doing Tong Bei Chuan, or they're doing one of the other styles that we have here. So over our 5 teachers, pretty much everybody who wants to learn Kung Fu can come here, or they can go to Mindful Wing Chun, or they can go to Wan Kum-leung, or they can go to the other people who still have schools operating. What the analogy I like to make is, when I was a kid growing up in England, nobody knew anybody that did yoga. We knew it was something that strange Indian mystics did in the mountains in India. And there were cartoons about it, guy with his leg caught behind his head. And there may have been, I don't know, hippie trippy communes where they had a yoga instructor. But nobody really, looked into it the way it had not become mainstream the way it is now, that everybody has done yoga. Everybody knows who somebody does yoga. There's lines of yoga wear. There's people walking around with yoga mats all the time. Gyms on every corner with yoga. So what happened? Did somebody suddenly transform yoga into some other practice? No. What they did is they somehow managed to make the connection to people in mainstream in their everyday life that yoga can be relevant to you. It can enhance your standard of living. You can be part of a body, mind, spirit practice that means something today. It's kind of non-denominational. You don't have to be a Christian. You don't have to be a Buddhist. You don't have to be a Taoist. You can do yoga. You don't have to be a Hindu. And people signed on for it. And I go to the gyms here. It's interesting. They have capoeira from Brazil, and they have Thai boxing from Thailand, and they have boxing from like the West. They have pole dancing, which comes from Vegas. And yet they never have Chinese martial arts. And I actually had said to one of the leaders of one of the owners of a local gym, why don't you try doing like a composite Southern Fist training class, with elements of Chinese martial art? Maybe you have to do something special. I get it. They don't want to do 6 months of horse dance training. You do like, some kind of modified version. Because nobody would be interested. I said, yeah, but you could have said the same thing about yoga. And people did. And capoeira, and Thai boxing, and pole dancing. It was only when you introduced it and said, who's interested? And they all came around. You were like, wow. But why do you do it with Chinese? And I think there's something to be said for a prophet is always without honor in his own country. That people in Hong Kong, particularly the Chinese, have grown up with Chinese martial culture as part of the landscape. But maybe it's a bit like, in England, they have those medieval jousting events where everybody gets together. But I bet you most of the people who do it are tourists. But English people, I want to go back to the jolly old days of England. There's a bit of that. And I think it's not the fault of the people, the Volk, the Yan, you can't, the Ren, you can't go out and say, well, I blame the people. We've reached a saturation point, and nobody's worked harder than me, and no one's worked harder than you to promote Chinese martial art. I think the thing is that what we've done is we've promoted it to the people who love martial art, who are going to do it. And your students are a wonderful, group, and our students are a wonderful group. What our focus going forward is, how do you take somewhere like Kwai Fong Martial Club? How do you take somewhere like City Wing Chun and you move it into more of the mainstream? It's like you said before, like when Sifu got to do his somewhat misguided interview for New York Times, in which he said he didn't have a Kung Fu school, which we're sitting in right now. But you said, I live in New York and I can't get in the New York Times. Why is that?
Yeah, well, I suppose it's not exotic, the local Kung Fu guy in New York, but a Kung Fu teacher in Hong Kong for someone reading that newspaper in the States is definitely a lot more exotic, yeah. Whereas I feel when I come here, they look at me as a white Kung Fu instructor as something exotic.
Yeah.
But certainly not in New York.
And definitely, I think that there are people in Hong Kong who train diligently in Chinese martial arts for their own health and well-being. And I've met very few. I mean, probably Ibrahim is a contrary to that. He is, but most of them don't have that profound interest in the culture and reading all the books and collecting all the movies and talking about the old black and white Wong Fei-hung films the way someone like Frank Bolt does, or my friend Michael Goodwin. I mean, you look at the level of research these foreign people have done, and yourself, where you just go, no Hong Kong person would do that. And we've sometimes come up against that lack of interest on the part of the government. I mean, it's amazing to me that you have a tea museum, a Sun Yat-sen museum, a newspaper museum, science museum. Now you can have a museum to celebrate the Chinese Communist Party. And I'm not saying Hong Kong shouldn't have those, but surely you should have a Hong Kong or Southern Chinese cultural center encompassing Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan, Kung Fu, Wong Fei Hung, Yip Man, Hong Ga, Wing Chun, Chinese opera in one place. Because I think if you ask people around the world to name what's famous about Hong Kong or a famous Hong Kong person, it'll be Bruce Lee or Jackie Chan. It would be Chinese martial arts. It would be Kung Fu. And if you asked about the cinema culture, it's Kung Fu movies. So why we don't celebrate that locally, I don't know. And I actually was complaining to somebody. I said, why the government doesn't do it? Somebody should do it. And they said, they are. It's you. And I'm like, it's kind of true in my non-profit. But, it's like, and every time I've come up against a wall financially or otherwise, I just felt that, if you have a mission in life, if you have a duty to do something, you should continue for as long as you should. And that's what we're doing here. I'll find some wood. Here's some wood down here. There we go.
Yeah, I think a lot of people were disappointed a couple of years ago when they demolished Bruce Lee's home in Kowloon Tong. And
that was an amazing story because it was sitting there for the longest time. And it was a short-time love hotel, I hear. So I'm told. Mm-hmm. And you could take a young lady there because in Hong Kong, it's very hard for courting couples to find anywhere for a little bit of intimate privacy. So they would go to among other places. You go to Bruce Lee's old home, and then it was empty for the longest time. And then there was all this palaver that there was going to be this restoration of it, it turned into a museum. And you told me something I didn't know, that apparently the government was being called on to pay for that, which they should have done, by the way, but they didn't. I mean, regardless of any other add-ons or requirements that you would refuse, the government should have paid for their most favorite son to have his home restored, somewhere for people to come to visit and to, appreciate the legacy of the guy that literally put Hong Kong on the map. So it was actually outrageous that be allowed to be demolished. But what amazed me was the amount of talk. I mean, the thing is, in the old days, I had a Bruce Lee cafe, and some of the other Bruce Lee fans had a story come out at the same time that we did the cafe, talking about that they planned, hoped, intended. You can plan, hope, and intend all you want. I'm most impressed. It's like I always say about the movie thing. It's not called tell business. It's called show business. Do it. Show me what you're doing. No, we're planning. Well, I had the Bruce Lee Cafe for like 3 years, and it was real. And I spent a lot of money, and we lost a lot of money on it. But it was something we did for Bruce Lee's memory. No one else ever did. And then, okay, you're going to have a Bruce Lee museum space. I donated my stuff to the Sha Tin Museum, and that's gone on. But for the home of Bruce Lee, you don't need to have constant press conferences, thinking, planning, talking. So many rich people in Hong Kong who should donate and make that happen. Why didn't you do it? By the way, no one ever came to me and said, hey, can you put the money together to make it happen? But the fact is that as far as a museum that commemorates Bruce Lee permanently, both in terms of martial practice and selling memorabilia, this is the place. Right. And we actually sold out to one of your students, my last copy of the first print run of Bruce Lee and I, my book about Bruce Lee. And now we're going to print run number 2 for the revised, re-edited version.
Now, can you tell people a little bit? It's a fantastic book. It's one of my favorite Bruce Lee books because I always prefer the books that have the more intimate stories rather than the ones that just basically, they're like an extended Wikipedia page. So can you tell our audience a little bit about your book?
Sure. I mean, books. But I mean, I always felt that given that writing a book compared to writing a script is such an arduous process, that if you actually go to the trouble of writing a book, it fills all those pages, you chop down all the trees in Siberia, and you put the damn thing out. It should be the book only you could write. And if your only kind of source is repetitive watchings of Bruce Lee movies or reading old magazine articles, then I feel that limits you. And that's kind of been done. I mean, Matthew Polly, my good friend, wrote, I think, the definitive Bruce Lee book, biography, and he was based out of my office here when he did it. And I was working on my book, and what I decided to do was go through the looking glass and show, okay, my own experience related to Bruce Lee. So, for example, when we talked about Bruce Lee making Fist of Fury, and then I had done Fist of Fury on television with Donnie Yen playing the Russian, so I talked about that. In Way of the Dragon, Bruce Lee goes to rescue a restaurant in Rome run by John Ben. I opened a restaurant in Hong Kong run by John Ben. So, he wants to take over the restaurant in Way of the Dragon, but you get the picture. So there was this kind of balanced question back and forward between this is what you saw Bruce Lee do, talking about his film in detail, and then you go back to my experience of him in the modern world and go back and forward. And at the time, I didn't know. My worry was people would be interested in Bruce Lee, but not in me. But what was interesting is that they did seem, because it sold out, we have to think that they like reading both sides of it. And a lot of people say, I know exactly how you feel. I have an affinity with the way you react and related to Bruce Lee. And it was interesting, you said something the other day about not for him, and if not for Chinese martial culture, you wouldn't be here teaching, you wouldn't have your Eurasian kids, you wouldn't speak Chinese to the extent you do, and I can say all the same about me. And I also have available still 36 Chambers of Kung Fu Cinema Volume 1. Volume 2, just going to print. And I've been working on Jackie Chan and I. And it's like if you do the Old Testament, you kind of have to do the New Testament, right? But that one is so huge now. I've just made the decision the other day, and I can exclusively reveal on Kung Fu Genius podcast, it's going to be in 2 volumes, Volume 1, Volume 2, because it's just, otherwise it's going to be, huge. I mean, it's going to be, you can do arm curls with it. So what we're going to do, the same we're doing with 36 Chambers, your Volume 1, Volume 2, and then later we'll have a special collector's edition, hardback edition. And then the same thing with Jackie Chan and I. It'll be Volume 1, Volume 2, and then we're going to put them together into one at a later time.
Now, Bruce Lee and I is going to be revised, you said,
I'm
for the
going
new
to revise, re-edited version and go to a second print run. But I've decided to update it. I mean, there's a lot of things that have happened. I mean, it's great talking to you because I don't feel I have to bite my tongue to talk about the drug letters. I mean, it's great. Every time I do any research on the drug letters, there's a picture of Alex going, and that's the one that comes. That's going to be there. I think if in years to come, when the aliens come to find out about Bruce Lee and they go drug letters, what will pop up is Kung Fu Genius going. And of course, Arrow Video people, this amazing job they found all of the. I had found in 1997 the bulk of the Bruce Lee Game of Death footage. And then subsequently thought in my wisdom and wrote in my book, oh, the other stuff is gone forever. And they found it. And they put it together in this amazing box set of stuff, which I enjoyed I've enjoyed a lot of the times because I've limited my own involvement in some of the, media outpouring of Kung Fu related stuff. I just do my own thing. And I enjoy it as, like everybody, oh my God, they found the footage and I can enjoy looking at it. And I didn't have to go to all the hard work of finding it or putting it all together. But I will write the book updating the current version of Bruce Lee and I to incorporate the new Game of Death footage and all the stuff that we found and all the things. Amazingly, the new things we know about Bruce Lee, which if you'd have asked me in like 1978 when Game of Death came out, by the way, in 2024, we'll be still talking about Bruce Lee with new stuff. Amazing.
It's incredible that was kept a secret for so long.
Which bit?
The drug letters and its contents. Obviously, we all knew that there was some basic drug use, cannabis, this, that, and the other, but the extent of it and also how it was smuggled into Hong Kong and the entire story behind it kind of, for me, filled in a lot of gaps because there were certain things about Bruce's behavior at that time which were kind of.
My response, I think, was the same as everybody's. I didn't want it to be true.
Right.
And I was waiting because the Lee family have been so outspoken against things they don't like, and people, including myself, and they have taste. They don't like meat. That makes 2 of us. But I thought they would come out and denounce it and say this is like the way they've denounced everybody else, and it was crickets. Yep. So I'm going, oh my God, this breaks my heart. And I'd done the documentary for History Channel about the death of Bruce Lee, and I was so glad we didn't know of the letters at that time, because that would have been an awful quandary. Because on one level, it would have been like, okay, as a professional documentarian, you want that footage, you want that information in the documentary, but at the same time, as a Bruce Lee fan, I was like, do I want to be the one to tell the world?
Sure.
Because as much as everybody goes on to Kung Fu Genius, as much as they go on to the other sites, History Channel really has a following. So when Lawrence Fishburne says, and now tonight, the reason Bruce Lee died, and it's the drug letters, I would have been like, why couldn't it have been the death touch or something like that?
Right.
Or Fan Moi San's story of the gang fight, something else, something more entertaining. Or my story about the poison cannabis.
Right.
Thing is, we still don't know for an absolute fact, but it's just it becomes increasingly likely that given this propensity for hard drugs, that may have played a part.
Sure. Yeah.
So it was very sad. And I can't say that it's affected my idolization or admiration for Bruce Lee as an individual, but it's because I admired him for so long, it's hard to put those things aside and just go, oh, well, he was taking drugs.
Right.
But I was shocked. I think everybody was.
Absolutely.
Wouldn't you?
Absolutely.
Your expression reflected it on that famous photo. So yeah, and I think it's kind of it's fascinating that you have this following for Bruce Lee. And as much as I admire, and obviously I'm writing about Jackie Chan, I would do future books about Sammo Hung and Lau Kar-leung and people of that caliber. I have to say, I would never have imagined that Bruce Lee would continue to eclipse all social media phenomenon of the last, I don't know, how many decades has it been since he
it's over
passed?
50 now. So
Yeah.
since he passed away over 50
Phenomenal.
years. Yeah, it's incredible.
Just incredible. And everywhere I go, all I seem to talk about is Bruce Lee, kind of like today. So that's good.
yeah.
But I mean, all of us, including Mak Sifu, everybody is just like going, well, if it wasn't for him, we wouldn't be doing. And sometimes when I was at my first job, proper job in the martial world, was at Combat Magazine. I was the chief writer and editor of the British magazine Combat. And where I would meet martial arts exponents of my generation, and they would kind of say, "Oh, well, that wasn't not because I didn't get inspired by Bruce Lee. I'm above all that. You know, I was inspired by character development through hard training."
Sure.
I'm like, "Were you bollocks? You know, you went to see a Bruce Lee movie, or maybe you saw Kung Fu on TV,
Right.
and you went to a martial arts school, and then you discovered."
Absolutely.
You know, it's a fascinating thing, and I don't know if you concur, but a unique phenomenon of the Kung Fu world that I don't think has been kind of appropriately acknowledged is, I think it's a blessing and a curse. The only people who do Kung Fu who are famous are those who are faking it. Like the most famous boxer is not Robert De Niro or Sylvester Stallone, even though they played one in the movies. The most famous tennis player isn't somebody starring in a tennis movie. The most famous car racer isn't. They're all the people who actually perform those disciplines. In UFC, MMA, the champions are the ones who are famous. But I almost feel there's no famous Kung Fu player who was not in films. Because I think if you stopped anybody in the streets and said, who do you know who does Kung Fu? They would say Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan, Jet Li, Donnie Yen, Sammo Hung. Everybody would do movies. Now, many of them did martial arts as well. But I don't think there's ever been a famous Kung Fu guy. So I think the downside to that is maybe there's like a distancing effect when people go, well, I'm never going to be Jet Li. I'm never going to be Bruce Lee. So I'm just going to admire them from afar. Whereas when you see like Serena Williams playing tennis, I would imagine any number of kids from minorities and difficult backgrounds in America went, I want to do tennis. Because there's that sense of now it's accessible to all. I wonder if we've done that with Kung Fu, or it's more like because everybody sees Kung Fu in the movies, they go, oh, well, that's in the movies, so you can't do it for real. Would you concur there's never been a famous Kung Fu guy?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So but then the great thing about it is, and you're the benefitist and so am I, is every time a movie goes into the theater, you've got this kind of $5, $10, $20 million advertisement for Wing Chun or Hung Gar or just martial arts in general, or MMA or kickboxing or karate or whatever style it is.
Right.
People go and see it, and there's a proportion of people who go, you know what, I'd like to try that.
Yeah. We always get a bump from every Yip Man movie that comes out. Yeah.
Do they come in thinking that they're going to fight 10 guys and all the stuff that Donnie does?
No, oddly enough, the bump that we get from all the Yip Man movies is we get more Chinese students who suddenly have interest in learning Wing Chun.
Right.
So I've noticed that, it's not a bunch of white guys coming to the school after watching Yip Man. It's a bunch of Chinese maybe
That's
wanting
so
to get more in touch with their culture, and now that here they have the opportunity. So,
we have the same here. I mean, because and probably on a greater turnover because there's more Chinese martial art pictures playing, I guess, on film in the theaters here and on different platforms than you would find in America. Mm-hmm. So as soon as one of these films comes out and is like widely circulated, suddenly people are like, I want to do Kung Fu. And then that's good news for us. Yeah. So, but do you think also, has it been limiting? Again, I go back to my aim in my lifetime to see Chinese martial art move more into the mainstream. Is that something that limited it?
No, I don't know. It's difficult to say because
I mean, if there were yoga movies, not including like Jackie Chan's Kung Fu Yoga. If there were yoga movies,
or yoga versus Kung Fu,
and there was the only yoga guy was a movie yoga performer. But it's not, is it?
No.
All the guys that are the idols or the gurus of yoga teach yoga, and you see everybody doing it, and it's like, I can do it too.
Yes.
I think that there's been a disconnect between the promotion of Kung Fu Superman and people realizing, hey, I could be that guy.
Yeah, I think we have had that problem. When I first started promoting my school, one of the things we did in typical traditional Hong Kong fashion was to do open demonstrations.
Yeah.
So there'd be like a Chinese cultural day
Yeah.
or Chinese New Year, and I would come with a bunch of my students, and we'd do, I'd have them come and attack me and pop, 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 put them on the floor and do all sorts of spectacular looking things.
Yeah.
And afterwards, sometimes people look at it as if they're seeing a show done by performers,
Yes.
and they don't see themselves doing that.
Yes.
Whereas if I could get 10 people to come in and try a class and show them how they could do it,
Yeah.
I would be more likely to get more students to join than if I did a demonstration with an audience of 1,000.
You're the same thing.
Yeah.
Because they're going to go, I can never be like him.
Right.
But when you see regular Joes like Mikey doing Kung Fu really well, and you go, wait a minute, it's like Krishnamurti said, if I was born this way, what hope is there for others?
Sure.
I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but what he was saying was, because he broke away from the Theosophists and said, no, I'm not the
world
chosen
teacher.
one. I'm not. It's like Life of Brian. I'm not the Messiah. I'm just showing the way.
Right.
And so then it becomes like, well, that's it. And I mean, in Japanese, sensei is like one that's gone before. It's not like master or grandmaster or
Right.
super califragilistic, high exalted Grubenführer. It is just somebody who's gone beyond, meaning
Yes.
somebody who'd actually been on the path longer than you and gone ahead of where you are,
Right.
and can lead the way. So that's a different mindset
Yes.
to be thou impressed by Kung Fu Superman.
Hey everyone, it's the Kung Fu Genius. Fans and practitioners all know that the wooden dummy is the most coveted tool in Wing Chun, and now you can learn all about it in my cleverly titled book, The Wooden Dummy. I wrote this guide with you, the practitioner, in mind. Rather than mystifying any of the concepts or hiding so-called secrets, I've laid it all out in meticulous detail. The book is contextualized for practitioners of any lineage of the art, not just those who come from WT. Over 300 pages in length, The Wooden Dummy breaks down every aspect from the form, both technical, historical, theoretical details, and it makes it the perfect companion for anyone who's learning the wooden dummy techniques. I've even sweetened the deal for you. If you want to get a copy of this book signed by me, just use the coupon code SIGNATURE when you purchase the unsigned copy, and you will get the signed copy at no additional cost. So go to the link below or go to citywingchun.com/shop. Look up the Wooden Dummy book. Don't miss your chance. This is definitely one of the best books I've ever written on the Wooden Dummy, and I hope you'll find it's the best book ever written on the Wooden Dummy. Get yours today. Check it out.
Yeah. So kind of bridging that more into films
Yes.
now, we had a golden age of Chinese martial art films.
Yes.
We had, we went from the more traditional Kung Fu films to the modern action.
Yeah.
Now, being that there's fewer and fewer people who are learning
Yes.
traditional Chinese Kung Fu, I want to know if you think that the genre, we're talking about the costumed Kung Fu films, if this is going to eventually die out, or if CGI and AI will keep these things going. What do you think is the future of traditional Kung Fu movies as we know them? Are we going to still have them? Will it reinvent itself eventually at some point? What do you think?
Well, I think you can ask the same thing of the American Western, that it's a genre that has had its heyday, and there was a period of time, I think there were like 30 different Western TV shows, and then Western A pictures and B pictures that were on in the theaters week in, week out. And then there was a period of time, perhaps, you said the 70s, when it was the blockbuster era, and you had things like, horror movies, and you had Star Wars, and so it was all sci-fi and horror, and the Jaws films,
Right.
rip-offs and that kind of thing. And then Westerns might come around again. Now, to me, I think that for the China market, there definitely will inevitably be television series and films created specifically for that 1.8 billion people, which will be period Chinese costume action stuff. And if you ever get to see any of that stuff, like I was on my treadmill in my place on Lantau, in my home Manana, and I'd be watching episodes of this Fot Yung Gap TV series. Is it Fot Yung Gap? Yeah, Fot Yung Gap TV series with Jumanjo, Vincent Zhao playing that character, and it goes on and on and on and on. So it's great if you're like kind of riding on your bike like a friggin' hamster, and you're watching this TV series because you get engaged with it, and you watch episode by episode by episode. So definitely it thrives in China. I think less of that gets out into the rest of the world. So there's a perception perhaps that the genre is dying away. It's not, and I think that the thing is, you get occasionally really good films overall that come out. Like we just had the Walled City movie that came out that everybody liked, and you have the Yip Man films, and you have an occasional period martial art film that kind of crosses over. But I think in the Western point of view, it's become people are not as fascinated, not as engaged. The other problem you have is with modern films coming out of China, because there's been tendency, which I never would have anticipated, to re-release all of these classic Golden Harvest, even obscure titles on Blu-ray with all the bells and whistles. It's hard. People are going to go, well, I'm going to buy that library title because library titles tend to be cheaper than new films. So I'm going to buy a library title. I'll buy 5 library titles to put them out on my label rather than one Donnie Yen Yip Man movie or the equivalent. Sure. So that's the other thing that's happened is there's a lot of films being made in China. The other thing that happened is that a lot of the people, the next generation, learned how to do this stuff in Thailand, in Indonesia, in Japan. I mean, Kenji Tanigaki, who was one of Donnie's stunt team for a long time, is now in Thailand with Bill Kong, and they're doing this kind of big new action film that Kenji is directing. Mm-hmm. And you had people like was it 2411? What are they now? The amazing stunt team in America. 2411? No. 24/7? No. Anyway, 2 numbers, and they did things like John Wick and film upon film upon film. Right. And I'm really bad with numbers. I'm so sorry, guys. David Leitch and his partner, and they do incredible work, and you can see that they have absorbed so much from Hong Kong filmmaking and put it into, like, for example, on John Wick when they had Scott Adkins in the fat suit, doing Samo. That's kind of a random thing to throw into a major Hollywood blockbuster, SPL Killzone, which I released in America back in the day. Samo in the purple suit fighting Donnie, and then you had that again in John Wick. So those guys, and the area where I think perhaps none of the above can do as well as China is still period stylized Chinese martial films with sword, with kung fu, whatever. We still do that better.
Right.
And I think that there is a constant, I would say, a shop floor like, almost business like, factory like creation of content in China for the China market. And I almost wonder if it is a reflection of Chinese as opposed to Hong Kong or global culture, that we really haven't had another superstar rise out of China. Mm-hmm. You have a lot of people starring in films without any of them becoming a movie star. And that's been a mystery to me. As somebody who's in that field, people say to me, well, like my kids would say, when are you going to make another film with Jackie? When are you going to make another film with Donnie? When are you going to make another film with Jiao Yunfat? Because I've had the privilege of doing all of the above. But then you almost feel like, of course, if you have an opportunity to work with them, you would. But should we not be focusing instead on who is the next young guy coming up who's, 30 at most, which is the age Bruce Lee was when he was really discovered, and 30 at most, but younger would be better. And that's the guy we should be promoting. And he should be doing hit films in China and Hong Kong. And then you take him into the West and you give him a crossover film like they did with Jackie Chan. Sure. And that really hasn't happened, which surprises me.
We have a kind of a horrible trend right now, I think, stateside, with making tons of remakes and reboots.
And they just remake The Killer? I haven't seen it yet.
And old IPs. Is that a trend that's going on here at all? I don't really see. I mean, every once in a while.
Well, it kind of is, because you get, it's from, the culture is deeper, but then how many Yip Man movies, how many Fok Yun Gap, how many Wong Fei Hongs, how many Monkey Kings, how many, Gum Yong, Jin Yong, Louis Cha remakes are there? There's many. But I think in America, I'm a believer in John Huston's dictum, which was, why remake the great movies? Why not remake the bad ones till you get them right? Like, I had that in my own career. I did a movie called The Blood Bond, which I was very disappointed with. And then a year later, I made a film called Borderlands, which I was very happy with. And it was like, I think Godard said, the best way to review a film is to make another film. And on that basis, somebody said, Shanghai Noon was a review of Wild Wild West. But in my case, I was reviewing my own movie and going, okay, my review of Blood Bond is, and I think that's the thing, that is really interesting, and it's something that I feel has been one of the negative aspects of social media, which has been filmmakers and individuals thriving purely on the negativity of talking about somebody succeeds, or they're not as good as we think they are. Somebody fails. Look at that. Isn't that terrible? Let's spread the word. I mean, I would talk to you privately about films and people I find disappointing, or I'm amazed that this guy's allowed to make movies. But I would never go on public record saying that about another filmmaker. At least, I can't say never, but very, very rarely. And what I think is, the fact is, you want to be motivated to do your own work and to be better. If somebody does something bad, do it well. When I made a bad movie, and I've made several, I'm sure, but I made a bad movie, it motivated me the next year to make a good one.
Sure.
If somebody does a good film, instead of talking about why they're not as great as they think they are, aspire to be like them. My first book, my first breakthrough, Hong Kong action cinema, came about because of another guy in Hong Kong, another Hong Kong film aficionado called Rick Baker, who I believe you know or you've met, right? So Rick, interesting character. But there's Rick Baker, the special effects guy, and Rick Baker, the special effect. We're talking about the latter. So Rick's this big, burly, bearded English dude, and one day we're in London, and he told me how he'd signed a deal to write a book on Hong Kong cinema. And he dealt with a major publishing company, and he was going to bring out this book, and yada, yada, yada. And all the way back, I was, God help me, living in Birmingham at the time with my little Chinese Birmingham girlfriend, and we're riding along back to Birmingham. I'm driving, and all the way I'm like shuffling, buffering, Rick, who you think he is? Shuffling, nothing. And finally, Pauline gets sick of hearing this, and a broken clock is right twice a day. She turns to me and she goes, "You know what, Bey? If you're so mad about him writing a book, why don't you write your own book?" Hallelujah, hallelujah. And the car sped up down the highway. And I got home and I said, "I'll show that Rick." And I wrote out 4 proposals for books. I sent them here, I sent them there, I sent them everywhere. Titan Books wrote back and they said, "Oh, we know you, you're the blah, 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 blah. Yeah, we'll do a contract, write a book." So then, of course, I went back and said to Rick, "I'm doing my own book." And it turned out, true to form, he was completely full of it. Now, he's published a lot of books since, to be fair to him. But at that time, he was full of it. He had no book deal. He was lying. So then he says to me, "Oh, Bey, could I have your details for your publisher? Maybe you'll publish my book." And I'm like, So no, I did. But no, nothing stopped him from doing what I was doing. But that's the point now. Today, I think, first of all, maybe we all need somebody like Pauline going, "What are you thinking about?" But secondarily, I think that rather than racing home and putting together a plan to do something creative, spurred by my anger and frustration, it would be like, wait till I get into my chat room. I'll tear him a piece. I'm going to write as, like 100 Doggy 9000. 100 Doggy 9000 thinks Rick Baker's a moron. Who cares?
Right.
It's like when people come to me and say, "I saw that film you made. I didn't like it." I said, the only part of that sentence that matters to me is I saw the film you made. I got to make a film. You didn't. You got to watch it. Lucky you. You didn't like it. I'll cry bitter tears at night as I get ready to make the next one or live my amazing life.
Right.
So I always look at it as being that we somehow have to allow ourselves to be inspired by the success and failure. Jacques Cousteau said a great line. He said, "We must believe in luck to explain the successes of our enemies." Which I always thought was a great line.
That's awesome.
By the way, just a quick commercial break of my own. The reason I'm schwitzing like a mule in here is I promised my kids I'd wear this Faith and Hope hoodie. My sons, Faith and Hope, are Hong Kong's leading, in fact only, twin Eurasian rappers, FXITHXHXPE, Faith and Hope. They're on Spotify and all the other music platforms now. They are dope. I say that. I'm not biased in the least, but Kung Fu Genius will back me up.
Yes, absolutely.
And Mikey will as well.
Yes, absolutely.
And so please check them out, as well as go on to www.release.com and on to, what is it that you're on? Pornhub? No, what is the one that, what carries?
OnlyFans.
Not approved yet.
KFG.
For Pornhub,
what were you on? You're on Patreon.
Patreon. Yes.
So, not OnlyFans.
Not yet. We haven't been approved
the day
yet.
is young.
So before we get out of here, I want to totally change gears here and talk about one of my favorite Kung Fu movies, and I want you to talk a little bit about it because it is in, I think, volume 1 of 36 Chambers. Hint.
Still available.
Yes. One of the movies, so what brought me to Chinese martial arts first was my father rented Enter the Dragon. I was doing karate. I saw Enter the Dragon, and I wanted to be Bruce Lee. The second kung fu movie I saw was Heroes of the East.
Oh, wow.
And I saw
How
that.
did you see that?
Because I grew up in the New York metropolitan area,
Yeah.
and we had kung fu movies every Saturday through Black Belt
Black
Theater.
Belt Theater, yeah,
Black
yeah,
Belt
of
Theater.
course.
So I remember watching this film, and
Yes.
it's like a martial arts porn
Yeah.
where the story is just the plot is just a thinly veiled story to get to the next fight
Yeah.
scene. And it was all the Chinese versus Japanese martial arts, and it was just amazing, and it made me fall in love with Chinese martial
Yeah.
arts. So
It's also Max Sifu's favorite movie. It's called in Chinese 中华丈夫, which means like Chinese husband.
Chinese husband,
中华
yes.
丈夫.
So I just
Heroes
thought
of the
maybe
East,
before
yeah.
we're out of here,
Yeah.
we could extol the virtues of this amazing
Oh my
film.
God! Well, that was incredible. I mean, this is during that golden era when Lau Kar-leung, Lau Sifu, from the Hong Kong lineage, who'd become this fantastic choreographer and later filmmaker, was working at Shaw Brothers. And there's a wonderful story that basically he'd been to Taiwan with his mentor, the director Chang Chit, and they had argued. I'm writing different books that will show you the different angles of why they fell out in Taiwan. So Lau Sifu came back to Hong Kong. I don't know if you know this, but he thought that he would now be blacklisted at Shaw Brothers because they would support Chang Che against him, and therefore he was going to accept an invitation to move to America and open a kung fu school.
Wow!
So you narrowly avoided having Lau Sifu as a neighbor. I don't know whether East Coast or West Coast, but he was invited to go there, and he was doing that, and he kind of went to Shaw Brothers to say goodbye to everybody. And Mona Fong, who was then running the studio, who was Run Shaw's mistress, later his wife, she had this habit of playing ping pong during negotiations. So she and Lau Sifu were playing ping pong. I mean, if they ever do Lau Sifu with a movie, you've got to have Mona Fong playing ping pong, and they're debating back and forward. And she basically said to him, come to Shaw Brothers, you can direct, make whatever movies you want. And then Lau Sifu was, what about Chang Che? I sod him. So this was much as Raymond Chow backed the right horse when he defended Bruce Lee against Lo Wei. The same way, Mona Fong, who has been maligned by some other directors, if she never did anything else in the history of Chinese cinema, and she did a lot, by the way, but if she did nothing else, the fact that she had that clarity of vision to go, no, you should be directing, come back to the studio, we'll support you to direct, and let us handle Chang Che. And so then he started doing his movie Spiritual Boxer and moved on from there. And what was amazing about Lau Sifu, I don't think any director at any studio has had such an unparalleled run of excellence with film after film. You know, obviously they're the kind of the ones that hit the 36th Chamber of Shaolin is the one that everybody talks, the one that RZA has been from Wu-Tang Clan has been touring relentlessly.
Yeah.
But then Heroes of the East was what happened was he wanted to make a film that was kind of like the anti-Fist of Fury, because he was like, okay, basically Fist of Fury was Chinese good, Japanese bad. And that became a whole trend, actually going back even to when Wong Yu directed The Chinese Boxer at Shaw Brothers. It was like, Chinese good, Japanese bad. And that was the trend. And then Lau Sifu was like, no, I can see, and he was friends with Yasuaki Shoji Karata, who was a Japanese, I believe you trained with him.
I have, yes.
Yeah, wonderful man. And he was like, why don't we do a film where it's not about life or death, it's not about the war years, it's not about, kind of a death match between Chinese and Japanese, but it's about mutual respect for martial culture. And he had that beautiful mind. I almost said has. I still can't believe he's not around. He had that beautiful mind where he could look at Japanese martial arts and know how to film them. Because if you look at the Japanese martial arts, the way they were filmed for Heroes of the East, they don't look like that in the equivalent Japanese movies of that era.
That's right.
No, the Japanese movies of that era have a lot to recommend them, the Chanbara films. But Lau Sifu, could look at the Japanese and say, oh, this is how this should be, this is how that should be. It was the same thing when they did Ninja in the Dragon's Den and Sanada Hiroyuki had to fight Conan Lee. And the late, great Koriyun said, I want you guys to fight like this. And at the beginning, the Japanese are a bit like, hang on a minute, this is our culture. But then they saw how brilliant he was at shooting action. And have you seen Ninja in the Dragon's Den?
Absolutely.
He made Sanada look incredible.
Yes.
So then they were like, yeah, you will do it your way. It was the same thing on Heroes of the East.
Right.
And so you had sword against sword, was it like 3-section against nunchucks and tonfa, and matched up, had the butterfly knives against the sai. And then also, what I always feel Lau Sifu is gets short thrift as a director. But if you look at the relationship between Gordon Liu's character, Lau Kar-leung's character, and Mizuno, what's her first name? Suki Mizuno? Anyway, Mizuno. Something Mizuno plays the actress who plays the wife. Sorry, Mizuno. There's actually genuine feeling, genuine emotion about that relationship. And then each of the how is it 6? It's not 7, is it? But there's all the Japanese masters that come over. But if I know you're going to ask me this question, I mean, there was going to be a test I would have studied. But anyway, so each of the masters has their own character. I remember that kind of Clouseau guy with the mustache.
Yep.
With the sai. And then even Lao Sifu himself plays the drunken master.
Yes.
And it's very much like the character that Yun Siu Tin played. I think it's the same year. I think both films were made in 1978, Heroes of the East and Snake in the Shadow, Drunken Master. We have to probably go back and check. But I think it was certainly 78, 79. I think 1978, all these films were made. 36 Chamber of Shaolin was made in 1978. It was incredible. They'd shoot these films for a couple of months and then done, or less than, and then it would be out, next. And Shaw's was this great, powerhouse of production. So, and what I love about it is that the end, that the two sides have fought to the finish. And yes, we do see the preference for and the bias towards Chinese martial art. But at the end, it's like the statement that martial arts is meant to Chinese, the Wu De, martial virtue, Mo Dat, is meant to bring peoples together in and that I thought particularly for that 1978 when so many of his audience, because you have to remember, they were making films for people in Hong Kong and Taiwan. China market hadn't opened yet. Hong Kong Taiwanese people remembered the brutality of the Japanese during the war years. So it was very brave and I think very timely to make a film that says, look, we need to put that behind. Yeah, we'll have this we'll recreate the conflict in the vasty fields of our film. And at the end of it, we'll find a way towards peace and mutual enlightenment. And what's amazing is that this shows you the benefits of martial art training, that Kurata played that profound character in Heroes of the East, and then X number of years later, in Fist of Legend with Jet Li, he kind of plays the same guy. And he also had played that character in Yuen Woo-ping's Legend of a Fighter, opposite Leung Ga-yan. Yeah, Leung Ga-yan. And then Leung Ga-yan. And then later, he did the same thing opposite Jet Li. And it's the same, and he's still acting today.
Yes.
This is a TV series last year. It's amazing, the longevity of this guy.
Yeah. Incredible.
So I'm with you on Heroes of the East, and I think, and I'll tell you another Heroes of the East story. There was a period of time, there was a guy, William Pfeiffer, who took over the Shaw Brothers Library under the heading of Celestial. He was the guy that helped create Celestial with the backing of a Malaysian company. I think it was Astra. And then they had Celestial in Hong Kong. They announced with great fanfare they were going to restore and release all of the classic Shaw titles, which they did, which is a great blessing. And William should be commended for his part in that. Also came out and said, we're going to remake them. We're going to make movies based on these films. That didn't happen, unfortunately. I'm not quite sure why. But at that stage, Donnie had come back from America. I brought Donnie back from America to do The Twins Effect. And Donnie Yen, his initial success had been as a choreographer. He won Best Action that year at the Hong Kong Film Awards for choreographing The Twins Effect. So it might sound ridiculous now, but there was a slight question in people's minds. Was he going to come back as a movie star, or was he just going to action direct and direct? Had his moment come and gone as a movie lead. So then I talked with him. I said, is there anything you want to do? Look at this library of films, and now Celestial is saying they're going to finance doing a movie. And he said, I want to remake Heroes of the East.
Wow.
And find the equivalently aged Japanese actress and put her opposite me, and then I'm going to fight all these guys, and we'll get all these fellas to play the different masters. And we had I think William at the time enjoyed the company of movie stars and filmmakers, but I don't know that he necessarily had that. He's never made a film. I don't think he had that spark to, now I'm going to actually make a movie with these guys. We went to some cigar bar, and we sat there, and we told him the story. I don't think he'd seen Heroes of the East. We told him the story of Heroes of the East, and nothing came of it. But talking to you now, I'm thinking, we finished. I'm going to call Donnie and say, we still should.
If they're going to remake a
movie,
I think that's a great movie to remake.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think the mistake they make in Hollywood is that they remake films that don't need remaking. The Crow, yeah. Well, again, I get back to this problem of I don't want to be the guy talking bad about other people's films. I haven't seen The Crow, so I don't know. But just as a concept, I don't necessarily concur with let's remake great movies again, because why do they need to be remade?
Sure.
I think the exception is a film that had a good idea, like, and I'll break my own rule and talk about one. For example, was it Man on Fire? Was the one with Denzel Washington as
Yes.
that had been a movie years earlier with Scott Glenn, which didn't work at all, and then they redid it. The same film, same story, but it's really good, and it's with Denzel. But the point is, most of the time, it's reverse.
Yes.
You know, I mean, again, I'll break my rule. Manchurian Candidate, you know, that was the great black and white film with Lawrence Harvey and Frank Sinatra. Then they remade that with Denzel Washington, and I was disappointed. I didn't think it needed to be remade. I didn't think it was a successful remake. You should take the films with a core good idea that wasn't well executed and then remake those. Or you take something where the ideas of it are so timeless that in retelling it, you can re-examine them maybe in a fresh way, because the concept breathes in the ears between the original film and now. But when you just do it for the sake of playing to an imagined audience, I see they're doing Highlander again with Henry Cavill. So we'll see how that turns out. I just showed my youngest son, Highlander the other day, and we were like, "Oh, it's a great movie." It is.
Yeah, if I may just interject here regarding those two, actually, like the problem with The Crow and also the problem with Highlander is that they had killer soundtracks.
That's true.
And that was part of the charm.
Yeah.
So someone needs to explain to me why anyone would go and see The Crow without that kind of cultural zeitgeist that was from the early 90s. You know, and then because you had obviously Brandon Lee's untimely death that added there.
I mean, I think it's possible to make a film with integrity that remakes an earlier movie, but I just think you need to bring an obvious thing would be, you know, the Dune and the old Dune. People are still going to love the old Dune. There's a lot of crazy stuff in David Lynch's version, but then you get to the Villeneuve version now, and you just go, okay, that's a different take on classic material. It's a bit like, you know, we're going to have Yip Man movies forevermore. We're going to have Wong Fei-hung films forevermore. A lot of it's down to the motivation. I think if you come in going, well, you know, there's these suckers are out there. They're all at Comic-Con. You know, we'll feed them. I mean, that's where I think, without naming names, but the Marvel movies and the DC movies ran aground, is that they started underestimating their audience. They got lazy. They were doing too much. They were rushing stuff out there. Same with the Star Wars content. They're just rushing stuff out and go, oh, these idiots know nothing.
Right.
You know, they'll sit in their parents' basements eating whatever we feed them. And there was a pushback against that. And people were like, no, I think this sucks. And I want something. I don't mind if you give me something good. But what's interesting is, in a flood of inferior content, you have something like Shang-Chi that becomes a hit. You have something like Joker that becomes a hit.
Right.
And you go, oh, okay, actually, if you do it well, people will still like it.
Right.
It's not that they don't like superhero flicks. They don't like bad superhero flicks or bad westerns or bad horror movies. But if you make a good one, then it's going to look at Deadpool Wolverine, right?
Yes.
If you make a good one, they will come.
Right.
But they're not going to come to see it just because you've got a franchise name and a V after it.
Right.
Oh, I have to see that, right? So.
Right. Well, hey, Bey, I could do this forever. This was fascinating, as always. It was great to
I feel happy, you know, because we had Professor Quentin Parker the other day, Professor of Astrophysics, and you said you could listen to him talk all day. So you put me in very esteemed company.
That's right. And our second episode here in the Marshall Club.
Yes.
Last time we did it in the office.
True.
This time we did it here
on the shop floor.
On the shop floor, yes. So thank you so much for
My
being
pleasure.
on the podcast again. Hope to do this again sometime in the future.
And everybody, when you come to Hong Kong, please reach. You can listen on Instagram at Marshall Club HK, and you can reach out to us. You can find me. Just look for Bey Logan on Facebook or other platforms. And we have our retail shop with all the released movie memorabilia, and we're also very open to visitors coming to experience martial culture. Reach at Bey, B-E-Y, at Realeast, REELEAST .com. Just one .com. Okay, Bey at Realeast.com. Reach out to me. We'll take groups, individuals, and anybody's welcome to visit.
Awesome. Thanks again, Bey.
My pleasure. Thank you, man. Kung Fu Genius in the house. With faith and hope.
All right, everyone. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Kung Fu Genius. As always, don't forget to subscribe to the Kung Fu Genius. Hit that bell for notifications. Support us on Patreon or here on YouTube with memberships. Let me know if you like this kind of content. And as always, I'll see you guys next time.
Word is I'm a kung fu genius. Technique speaks for me, not lineage. Forget Jet Li, cause I'm the one. Many call me seafood, but to you I'm Seagung. And I produce masters. You surpassed us. Your kung fu stiffer than corpse and caskets. City Wing Chun is the house I built. Violate the gate and your blood gets spilt. Alex, Richter, always the victor.
We're like two of the least likely karaoke partners in musical history.
Oh, hey, oh, Xiu Man Chong Long. Yeah, we can do it.
That's great. I mean, I'm very impressed. All right, take it away.